This is Group 1 from CSD 511.
And today we bring you 3 different stories from women on how hearing loss has impacted their own life. This first story comes from Mary, now in her 90s, reflecting back on how hearing loss has affected her beginning in childhood.
When I was a child, I knew that if I turned on my right side, I wasn't hearing very well. And I didn't relate it to anything. I just thought, well, I know it, but there's nothing I can do about it.
When asked about school, Mary, like any typical kid, wanted to do well. And this is when she shares with us her memories of the coveted Brownie class. You might not recognize the name, but growing up, I'm sure all of us wanted to be in our school's Brownie class. She's like any kid. She wants others to believe in her.
There was a B class and a Brownie class, and I so wanted to be in that Brownie class. I never made it. So I remained in the unintelligent class until I got to high school.
So now we fast forward through Mary's life to college. She's come a long way since being skipped over for the Brownie class, and now she's doing well as a student nurse. She's developed some compensatory strategies to work around her hearing loss, but then something happens.
I was working in the operating room with a mask, and the doctors had masks, and apparently I just stood there when they asked me for something, and the doctor, thank goodness, picked it up.
So she decides to move forward and seek out some medical services. But this isn't necessarily an easy task.
There was only one doctor in the vicinity that specialized in otology.
But she gets an appointment, and after he examines her,
he did diagnose it as otosclerosis.
For those of you who don't know, otosclerosis is an abnormal growth of bone near the middle ear that can result in hearing loss. Meanwhile, she's still a student nurse, and she has dreams just like any other aspiring professional. But now she's just been given a diagnosis.
I knew that I had a condition that would not go away, and I really wanted to work in the operating room, but of course, they didn't want me in the operating room.
Now, it's worth noting that otosclerosis is an inherited disease, and Mary has an idea of what it looks like. She knew her father had a severe hearing loss that resulted in eventually him being deaf, and she didn't want to follow in his footsteps. So she stakes herself out in a library.
In the medical library. And I knew that there were 2 doctors in the United States that could do this surgery.
And she gets the surgery, and with hearing aids, it restores some of her hearing. So, I wonder, does Marion feel like any of this has held her back?
I think it's held me back, but just like Aunt Betty telling me I couldn't learn, I think maybe I've done better in spite of it.
We finish up our story about Mary with a few comments from Hillary, Laura, and Lindsay.
I've known Mary for a very long time, and she's always been a very resilient person who just takes challenges head on. And as she said, because she has been living with hearing loss from the time that she was a young girl, she had to learn to cope.
She really sounds like she was able to come up with her own strategies and adapt to her own hearing loss. I wonder how it would be different for those people who acquire hearing loss later in life.
People with later onset of hearing loss typically have a harder time coping and adapting their lifestyle, which leads us to our next interview of Vicki, who acquired hearing loss in her 40s.
I noticed my hearing loss about 38 or 39 years old, and at the age of 40 I got hearing aids. I didn't care for them, so I didn't wear them very often. They said it was partly hereditary and partly acoustical nerve damage from working in the restaurant and bar industry.
Vicki has benefited from hearing aid technology, but as she explains,
there is no hearing aid on this planet that will give you perfection.
She enjoys social outings, but her hearing loss forces her to ask for help.
in a movie, I often say to the person next to me, and I like to go with someone else so I can say, what'd she say? What was that? Why'd they laugh? I see people laughing at different things, at maybe a comedy show, and I just smile and go, ha ha.
Younger people with hearing loss can feel embarrassed about having to wear hearing aids.
Yes, there is a social stigma that says that hearing aid usage is associated with old age, as Vicky described so beautifully.
It's also kind of a stigma that people that wear glasses are not stupid and old, but people that can't hear are stupid or old.
Because Vicky's hearing loss causes her to miss out, she feels depressed and disconnected.
I know I miss out on a lot. I know I do, and it kind of hurts me. Sometimes I get a little bit depressed about it, but there's nothing I can really do. I think I would mortgage my house if there was a surgery as such that you could have to better your hearing.
A prime example would be when she attended a comedy show with her daughter.
She was so loud, but I couldn't understand some of it.
Right.
And she was funnier than heck. I know that, only because people were laughing and laughing and laughing. And I heard less than 50%. And my daughter, who bought me the ticket, which wasn't cheap, said, how'd you like it? And I said, I loved it. I never said a word.
On a daily basis, Vicky owns and runs a busy downtown bar.
When the situation arises, Vicky has no problem clarifying how she feels about hearing loss as a disability.
And I've just said, listen, this is not a stupid problem. You know, this is a disability.
Right.
And people that have disabilities are not stupid.
Vicky experienced noise-induced hearing loss, which is the second leading cause of hearing loss in the nation.
As we transition to our next interview with Sharon, I would like to mention that there are 4,000 new cases of sudden hearing loss, and only 10 to 15% know the etiology. Sharon falls into the 85 to 90% that does not know their cause.
It would be about 7 years ago. The diagnosis was undiagnosed sudden hearing loss. By autumn, I was aware that I did have some hearing loss. And it was a concern, and I felt like a little bit in both ears. And I still was functioning, no problem.
While at the dentist, she hears a pop.
I just heard a tiny pop. And that's the best way to describe it, but it was almost like a metallic pop. And my hearing was gone.
Sharon made an appointment with a specialist.
And he said I definitely had considerable hearing loss in my right ear and a little in my left ear, and he could find no cause. So things just went along. And I went back to him a little later, and because I felt like it was improving, and he said, no, it's not improved, your other ear is just compensating. He did not offer any help or say there was anything that could be done for me. And so his statement was, and I felt like it was pre-rehearsed, probably, that they're told to say, I am so sorry. So that was his final word. So I thought, there's got to be more that can be done.
Still frustrated with her diagnosis, Sharon goes back for a second opinion.
I just wanted another opinion. He diagnosed the same thing, undiagnosed sudden hearing loss. Again, used the same rehearsed phrase, I am so sorry. So I said to him, well, what about getting a hearing aid for the ear I can hear out of relatively well? Would that help? And he said, well, that might be a possibility. I said the hearing would then be increased somewhat. And he said that was a possibility.
Taking things into her own hands, she heads to Costco to look into buying a hearing aid, and this is how it went.
I just felt more confident. I stood up a little straighter. I walked a little more rapidly. I enjoyed shopping definitely more, even though, to my knowledge, I could not hear any better.
Sharon was sold, but after discussing the finances with her husband, the cost wasn't worth the benefit.
She was not going to give up and discussed the matter with yet another specialist who suggested a bone-anchored hearing aid.
It's the little box they put on your head. They put a little screw into your skull.
A bone-anchored hearing aid is an invasive procedure of drilling into the skull to transmit sound through bone to the inner ear. This is most often used for middle ear or conductive hearing loss. However, since Sharon's hearing loss is undiagnosed, she is hesitant about such an invasive procedure.
He said that would help me. And it probably would. I was not, I don't know, I felt a little bit like I was being railroaded.
But I just didn't feel confident to do that without a diagnosis. So I have not gone back to him.
Sharon doesn't know what to do, but one day while scratching and pulling at her ear, she experiences something remarkable.
Just for, I'd say a full second, I could hear, and it was wonderful. So I tried pulling my ear in every direction, and I was not able to regain it, but I thought, how can this be permanent when that, even though it was instantaneous, it was long, it wasn't a millisecond.
Yeah.
I could really hear. That gave me a little clue of how much I'm missing.
Sharon is at a crossroads and is still unsure about which direction to go. However, the topic of hearing loss is further discussed by Hillary and Laura.
Hearing loss is an invisible handicap. It is the third most prevalent health condition facing older adults. Currently, only 20% of those who could benefit from treatment actually seek help. When individuals with hearing loss and their partners receive support and education regarding hearing loss and communication strategies, there is an overall improvement in quality of life.
With the doubling of the aging population in the next 20 years, there will be many more people needing the benefits of strong oral rehabilitation programs. Rehab approaches should include a component which helps people recognize and accept their hearing loss, and which will hopefully demystify the fear, shame, and isolation that can accompany hearing loss.
Changing perceptions surrounding hearing loss is critical to increasing the number of individuals who benefit from oral rehabilitation and who ultimately will live well with their loss.